The nation of Sri Lanka has an almost perfect ESG rating of 98.1 on a scale out of 100. This proves that ESG is dog at figuring out both how stable the investment is and how not corrupt something is.
This is a time that you need colonialism. You really do. You
What do
need.
you mean?
Well,
You need the white man to go into Sri Lanka and fix the problems for them? Is that what you're saying? Or you want to watch this video? What is this video, Adam? Set up this video that no one
Okay.
cares to watch.
Well, we don't have to watch it. I just thought. I mean, are you getting the Sri Lanka destroys our argument that what is it? ESG is no big deal. ESG is a scam, but it's a scam in a completely non-conspiratorial. Well, I guess it is technically a conspiracy, but
my argument was never that ESG is not a big deal or that ESG will not cause harm to the world. It very well might do those things.
Right.
And I wouldn't be that surprised if ESG has something to do with corporations going woke. I don't 100% buy it because it seems like corporations were really going woke for years before ESG started getting pushed. So I'm not 100% certain that there's like the one-to-one correlation. And I would be totally good with seeing ESG thrown into the trash can. My only contention when we covered the James Lindsay Destiny ESG conversation is that James Lindsay was kind of using ESG and Klaus Schwab as basically James Lindsay has been constructing his corkboard of like all the woke shit. And he basically put ESG and Klaus Schwab like in the middle of the corkboard, and all the yarn strings point to him. Like they all originate from this point. And that's my contention. I really don't think that is the origin point for any of this stuff. I think ESG is basically dick riding, as the kids say, wokeness. I don't think it's the thing that's causing wokeness.
Right. So. They have the causation backwards. So yes. I completely agree. Let's talk a little bit about ESG before we get into the video, because so the argument that James Lindsay, and I don't know if it originated with James Lindsay, but I've seen it in other places. I think even Russell Brand is making this argument now that ESG is a way for shadowy elites to force wokeness onto corporate boards.
We should probably explain what ESG is first,
right?
I guess that should have been the first thing we did.
Sure. So ESG stands for environmental, social and governance, right?
Yeah.
So yes. it's you're going to be environmentally sustainable. You're going to have social justice going for you, and you're going to have good governance, which means basically diversity in the workplace. So, so it's all these woke things. Now, in reality, I am under the impression this is a way for companies that are massive polluters and are actually doing tangible damage that can be measured to get their score up since they're grouping all of these things together. They're going, listen, we're massive polluters here at ExxonMobil, but we have a black trans woman on our corporate board.
Let me pause for one second. Let's go back for 1 second.
Okay.
So basically what happened was, I think we watched a video about this or talked about it or something, I don't remember, where, this was, I think, what year was it? I think it was in response to the Vietnam War or something. Whatever, it doesn't matter. There was a time period in American history where people who were financial guys wanted to start creating.
You're going like way back.
They wanted to create like funds and market funds, basically investment vehicles for people who want to invest in companies that were environmentally friendly and socially conscious. Had good social consciousness in terms of not being horrible with their pollution and child slavery and all this stuff. Yeah. And so they basically want to create a fund that they could sell to people and say, hey, if you want to buy stock, if you want to invest in these companies have, high scores for not being, horribly corrupt and not being horribly big polluters or whatever.
Right.
Okay. That over time evolved into this thing called the ESG. Now, the ESG is supposed to be that essentially, and this is what Schwab and other people like the BlackRock guy are trying to get pushed because the BlackRock guy controls this big fund, is that they want to basically be able to convince people to invest in, like, say,
Yeah,
ExxonMobil.
dirty companies, polluting
Right.
companies, right. So
Yeah, or Amazon.
it's a seal of greenwashing.
Yes, or some company like that by saying, listen, you're afraid that Exxon is going to pollute, but listen, we created this ESG fund, this ESG marketplace. This is only for, highly rated, environmentally conscious companies. Look at ExxonMobil has a high ESG score, okay,
Right.
essentially. So what's logistically happening here.
But
Now,
and the ESG store isn't even measuring the amount of pollution that the company has. It's measuring how likely the company is to be regulated. So
exactly.
how
Right.
likely the company is to get in trouble for being a dirty company. Yeah.
Right. And that's the real scam here, is as you said, it's not measuring what their actual rate of pollution is at
Right.
all. It's
Yes.
it's it's measuring how likely they are to run afoul of whatever government the company is located in.
Right. So if
Which
you go ahead.
does make some more sense in terms of like investment strategy, but it doesn't mean that you're being a good citizen by investing in that company.
Well, and it completely goes against the argument of the James Lindsays of the world. Because if your argument is people are going to
Mhm.
use these ESG scores to force companies to become green companies, you would want the company to have you would want the polluting company to have a low ESG score so that they would be uh, so you would have some leverage over them to regulate them, right? If the
Mhm.
company can just buy a high ESG score, what leverage do you have to regulate them? Like they already have a
Yes.
high ESG
Right.
score.
Right. Well, James could fix the argument by just making a few minor modifications, at least fix the element that you're talking about, which would be if he acknowledged or understood, and maybe he has, and I haven't seen it, so I apologize if that's the case, that a lot of the environmental part of the ESG score is bullshit. And because he doesn't really care about that. He's more fixated on the social and governance part, which is
Right.
where all the woke shit comes in. And you can make the argument, and he's made the argument, and this is probably true to some extent, is that a lot of the companies engaging in woke policies are doing so because they can kind of offset where they're lower by like making sure they have, X number of trans people, X number of black people on the boards, or, whatever woke shit is part of the SG part of the ESG score.
Right. Yes. But none of this is being forced. All of this is pandering to woke intuitions in the marketplace.
Right. Well,
It's suburban housewives so that they will buy the stock of these dirty companies.
yes. And my main contention is I think, as you said, I think he's getting the causation correlation reversed. I think these companies really started to adopt ESG stuff as woke stuff became popular, and the companies are trying to signal that they're woke companies. I don't think the companies were forced to adopt this, and that is why they became woke.
Right.
So,
Yes, I used the example of the Dove rating system I've talked about on the show before. There is this organization called, I don't know what they're called. They're like a 501c nonprofit, and they rate movies by how Christian they are or how
mhm.
anti-religious they are. And Christian movies get like a 5 Dove rating. The lower the Dove score, like the more secular it is. That company, they exist because there are Christians that want to watch movies and don't want to watch movies that are anti-religious, right?
Right.
But you would never say that company exists to force movies to be Christian. Like that's not a thing, right?
Right.
But they're literally making that argument with ESG. And I feel like ESG is more catering to people who don't want to buy environmentally unsound companies. Like if those people didn't exist in the marketplace, this ESG thing would have no power whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, there is a big cause of concern with the Biden administration. Apparently, they were thinking about it. I don't believe they actually went through with this. They were thinking about adopting some ESG standards to be like national standards on a broad level that should have to be followed to some extent or something. They're trying to do something with the ESG scores, to hook up with the ESG scores. And I think that's a huge cause of concern.
Sure. Yeah.
I believe they scrapped that at the last second and that didn't go through, but there's been a lot of really weird, horrible woke shit that has come out of the Biden administration, which I think is pretty despicable. So,
well, I could. That's something definitely to be aware of, and obviously to fight against. I guess the correlation on the Christian movies and the Dove thing would be like, if the Motion Picture Association of America was just gonna, basically let them rate all movies.
Exactly.
You're like, oh, okay, well now we're in trouble here. We're not just rating movies for Christians. We are literally trying to make all movies acceptable to Christians.
Though, it could actually, now that I look at it, it could be a total scam from the Biden administration. Because
they're doing the same thing for votes that the corporations are doing for stock sales.
Sort of. Because if the environmental part, which was when the Biden administration was talking about like adopting ESG standards, it was the environmental part that was the thing that they were talking about. And if the environmental part isn't even about really, making the companies clean, but just making sure that they follow like pre-existing government guidelines, then it wouldn't, like if the Biden administration adopted that, they're just adopting the thing that already exists, which would mean it was a totally bullshit move just to be able to point to and say, look at what we've done. We've made these companies green, when in reality they haven't done anything.
Well, that's what they want to do. Their voters. Right. This is the thing. It's hard to say how much of climate change is an immediate problem and how much of it is gaslighting so Democrats can get elected. So just let's say, 50% of it is gaslighting, alarmism so that they can get elected. The problem with that strategy is that once you're elected, you have this totally spazzed out electorate that is expecting you to do radical things for you to win the next election, because the planet's going to be gone in 12 years, and if you're not doing radical things, they're upset with you. So if they can do something like this that appears to be radical but really is not radical at all, that's kind of the sweet spot for them, right? All right, Sitch left again. Sitch, why don't you just tell me you're going to leave?
No, I'm here.
Why don't you just say, listen,
I didn't leave. I'm right here.
I need to take a break.
I'm right here. I think what you said is a good point. And I think that's exactly what's going on. If they hype everyone else, if they hype everyone up, then they have to have some solution. And what's better than a solution that doesn't actually solve anything?
Well, that appears to be, we're going to force all of these companies to be green, but really you read the fine print and it's like, just act like you guys are being green and we're good.
It's like, I don't know if you remember with the Obama administration, they passed like the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act for women.
Right.
And it's like, okay, that meant nothing. It's like companies can't discriminate and pay women less because they're women. It's like, well, that was already the law, so good job.
Okay. So that's the ESG portion of this. There is also an MMT portion of this, which we don't have to get into the MMT specifics because I know that it bores the shit out of you. But everybody and their mother has been messaging me about how Sri Lanka is the evidence, the smoking gun that both ESG is a blight on society because ESG is what caused all of the turmoil in Sri Lanka. And MMT is also has been severely debunked by Sri Lanka. So that's why this video is on Sri Lanka. And we're going to make the ESG MMT connections here on the situation. This is like a pretty good explainer on what's going on in it's Sri Lanka. It's not Sri Lanka. Maybe is it pronounced Sri Lanka?
Listen, as an American, I get to pronounce
Right.
things however I want to. Okay, it's
Yeah,
my God-given right.
There's no SH in there. It's Sri Lanka, which is very hard to say as an American. But so yes,
They should spell it correctly if they want us to say it correctly.
Nobody who's sending me these messages about ESG, James Lindsay included. I mean, James Lindsay's welcome to come on and talk to us about ESG. I feel like I have a pretty good bead on what is going on with ESG. And everyone says, oh, you should talk to James Lindsay about this. Well, I don't know that James Lindsay wants to talk to us. James Lindsay might be grifting off of ESG for all I know.
I don't think I don't think James Lindsay's grifting on anything.
He's definitely drank the Kool-Aid on ESG is the next rise of the Satanist movement.
So first of all the pronouncing things say Sri Lanka, like there's an H in there.
Okay.
So
Sri Lanka.
But no, I don't think James Lindsay's grifting. I think it's just what I've always said. My critique of James from the beginning is just he's using the lens he uses to look at wokeness, which is good for that. And he's kind of putting the rest of the world's information through that lens. And I think that leads you down conspiratorial pathways where you kind of trick yourself into believing all these things that are going on, which are not going on, are actually happening.
Yes.
And I think he's too thirsty to find the smoking gun, like the missing puzzle piece that ties everything together. And, ESG and Klaus Schwab would be a good, the thing that ties everything together. So I think it's a little bit of wishful thinking in that regard.
But as you've said, he puts way too much faith in the Klaus Schwab argument. He really does.
Yeah.
I messaged James Lindsay a long time ago and said, listen, you got to read selector theory. You're making all these selector theory mistakes. You believe you're violating rule 1. No man rules alone. You're putting way too much faith in one guy that has all this power. I mean, that's the one thing if we learned anything from the January 6th situation, it's that even a president doesn't have that much power, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he needs people to follow him.
But they're acting like Klaus Schwab has more power than Trump did.
Right.
I mean, if you want to live in that world I feel much safer living in the world where we have decentralized power as much as we have. So
sure.
Klaus Schwab has to come up with some grift ESG score thing just so he can sell his market to the fund because he's running all these dirty companies. Although Klaus Schwab, I think, wants companies to be cleaner. So he's in the same group that wants that.
Right.
Yeah.
But this would be even weird because since ESG is a scam, at least the environmental part is definitely a scam. I don't even does Klaus Schwab understand that it's a scam and doesn't care, or he doesn't know it's a scam? Because I'm assuming that he's a true believer. It seems like he's a true believer.
Yeah, he might not even know that it's a scam.
Right.
And that's another.
He should. I mean, I assume you'd have to be an intelligent guy to get to that position that he's in. But maybe I'm really over. Maybe I'm completely wrong.
So ESG plays a portion in this story. So obviously, pause whenever you feel like it. So
it's brought to you by
you know nothing about Sri Lanka, right?
No.
This is your first look at
I don't even know where Sri Lanka is.
Here. It's fresh.
Where is Sri Lanka? I don't even know how to say it.
Sri Lanka is
Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka. It's in
Sri Lanka.
It's in Antarctica.
Oh,
Curiosity Stream and Nebula, my online streaming platform. Hi, welcome to another Cold Fusion video. This is Sri Lanka.
Oh, there it is.
Look,
Awesome.
seek and ye shall find. Right there.
There you go. Right off the coast
at
of
that.
India.
Yeah, it's an island.
Listen,
nation.
I knew it was in one of those places, one of those
Right.
South Eastern Asian places.
And you can see right there, no SH.
Population 22 million. And
22 million
They have a pretty cool flag. It's like a line with a sword
on that little thumbtack.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could fit 22 million on that.
an independent island off the coast of southern India. Not long ago, they were South Asia's most developed nation. But right now, they're in a severe economic crisis. The country is $51 billion in debt.
MMT, oh shit! What's going on here?
Oh, wait, what does that mean? He said $51 billion in debt. To who?
$51 billion in debt. Well, you want to have this conversation before we get into it? Maybe it would be helpful. So
Well, I'm assuming he'll talk about it. He'll say is it debt to itself or debt to other countries? Because if it's debt to other countries, then they have a problem.
Well, here, if you're an island nation,
Yes.
you probably have to import a lot of stuff.
I
right?
would assume, yes.
Right. Okay. Now, if I need to import food, gas, fuel, whatever, if are other countries, is America going to sell me natural gas for the Sri Lankan didgeridoo or whatever they use for currency? Or would they much rather have
you offensive motherfucker?
Well, I don't know what currency they use, but
The Sri Lanka didgeridoo.
I don't know what the Sri Lankan dollar. Look at
the
this.
Sri Lanka shrieker. Okay.
Yeah, the Sri Lankan shrieker. I like that.
Yeah.
Are they going, or is the United States going to say, listen, we would prefer if you paid us in dollars?
Yeah, of
right?
course, obviously.
So if we have to pay in dollars, Sri Lanka needs to get dollars. How do they get dollars? How does anyone get dollars? Well, you can buy dollars on the foreign exchange for euros if you've got euros, but you might be in the same situation with euros. I don't have euros either. Mm-hmm. You can buy them with gold. You can buy, how about this? Let's do a crop of wheat and let's sell that wheat for American dollars, right? Now we have some American dollars we can buy natural gas with.
Right.
So the idea behind MMT is that if you have everything that you need in-house in your own nation, you can do a lot of things with currency that you can't necessarily do if you're forced to import a lot of stuff that you need just to make your nation work. Yeah. Sooner or later, you're going to need some foreign currency. So I'm assuming that they got in debt because they were like, listen, I would like to buy some natural gas. Maybe I need to borrow some dollars to do it. Right?
Okay.
So they took out a loan. What were you going to ask?
I was going to say, can you hear that?
No, what is it?
Hold on.
I hear that. Like a little tapping or something.
Not tapping. It's like a consistent, like, you don't hear that?
No, I don't hear that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's one of those horrible cicadas, like right out my window going.
Those are the worst. When you're trying to sleep and
like,
you wake up
my
and it's like
God.
buzzing in your ear.
Holy shit. It's the worst thing ever.
So here's some people with signs that say, we will not be silenced. Your greed has cost my future.
Mm-hmm.
This is another reason why. What was the nation? I guess maybe we should look it up. What was the nation that decided they were going to go full crypto bro and they were going to make all of their businesses exchange in Bitcoin?
The South American countries like Colombia or something.
They bought Bitcoin at the top of the market at like $60,000 a Bitcoin, and then it dropped down to $20,000 a Bitcoin.
El Salvador. Sorry,
El Salvador, yeah.
Yes.
And I was telling people, I had friends of mine who were like, Bitcoin's going big. You look at El Salvador, proof.
You're like El Salvador, the murder capital of the world. All right.
Exactly. I was like, El Salvador. Listen, if you're in it, and this is why I'm certain why the Tin Pot dictator of El Salvador did this, because if you're a Tin Pot dictator, sure, you can run the printing press all day and night and do your, print up your Sri Lankan didgeridoos, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
getting people to take those Sri Lankan didgeridoos for anything of value, that's a different story, right? But if you run your economy on something that already has value, like Bitcoin, then it solves the problem for you as a tin pot dictator. You're like, listen, somebody else created the value of the currency for me. Never mind the fact that the people who created that value for you are anonymous crypto bros on the internet. Like, how's that going to work out well, right? You're not really controlling the value. You've solved the value dilemma, but you've created a completely different dilemma. Like, how do you manage price stability? You don't.
Rolling blackouts are rampant. The currency is crashing. Medication, fuel, and some food is in short supply.
Why do you think it's in short supply? They don't have currency to buy it.
Even school exams had to be cancelled because of the shortage of printing paper.
An economic crisis in Sri Lanka, which is becoming increasingly dramatic, with residents' life savings virtually disappearing into thin air. One estimate from Johns Hopkins University shows real inflation at over 130% in March. The government is even asking airlines to stop refueling in the country to save on fuel.
Many Sri Lankans have had enough of the horrific situation. The homes of government officials have been torched, and the sitting Prime Minister even had to flee to a naval base for his own safety. Protesters have also stormed the presidential residence. They were swimming in the president's pool, eating his food, and drinking his alcohol. So how could such a disaster happen? Well, first, we need to look at the Rajapaksa's family.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
This guy's got a really good channel. Do you ever watch his video?
Nah, this is the first I've seen.
Really? Yeah, he does science and all kinds of different videos. Yeah. The rise of a powerful family. I don't like screen tags without voiceover, so.
The Rajapaksas has been a powerful family in the country for a while. Their wealth came from rice and coconut farming, and their power from their activities in politics.
Now, how does P plus P equal R work here, or does it? Well, I see a lot of.
What do you mean?
Can these people be racist, or I guess
I think
none of them have
listen,
white privilege, so I guess
they can be racist if they're in Sri Lanka. Okay, but
Yeah.
they can't be racist if they go somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
In Sri Lankan politics, you have to be somebody to be elected. As Razeen Sally, a professor at the National University of Singapore, told the Washington Post, quote, "You cannot win in politics if you're not from an established family." The second of 9 children, Mahinda Rajapaksa, became president in 2005, and for 10 years, the country became a family business. As the family's influence grew, soon, other brothers, sons, nephews, cousins, daughter-in-laws, and other relatives.
I see why you had your whole nepotism rant at the beginning of the stream.
Oh, look, it's Michaela Peterson right there.
Okay, I understand where you were coming from now. Okay, why it was on your mind.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So.
Well, this is autocracy 101. Like, one of the problems autocracies have is that you can't get the meritocracy virtuous cycle going because you're so concerned about maintaining power that if anyone smarter than you gets above you, they're going to take the power away from you. So you either surround yourself with family members and hope that your family members are smart enough to run the country, or you surround yourself with idiots who are super loyal and there's no way they can run the country.
Wait, he's not the president now, though, right? It said he suffered a loss. He ran an unprecedented third term and suffered a loss.
Yeah, he goes through the whole chain of.
Joined the government, occupying top positions in various administrations. Sri Lanka was now a family affair. Mahinda named his brother Gotabaya as defense secretary, while Basil and their oldest brother Jamal were placed in charge of irrigation and economic development.
Economic development. Now, would you want someone with some experience in charge of economic development, or just,
Hey, you don't know, Adam. His brother could be, have a PhD from Oxford,
right?
okay, in economics. You don't know.
He could.
You don't know.
Yeah. He could be a crypto bro from Florida. I don't know.
Sri Lanka enjoyed years
Why you
of
had to
growth,
throw Florida
fueled by a
under the bus?
mountain of foreign
Everyone knows Florida, man.
debt. But for much of their rule, things were going well. Despite some critics, many Sri Lankans were fans of the ruling family, not only for bringing up the country in social standing, but also for bringing peace to the nation. From 1983 to 2009, there was a horrific civil war in the country. A rebel group called the
2009, 30 years civil war. That's crazy.
That is crazy, yeah.
Tamil Tigers would fight against the government, citing discrimination. After a 26-year military campaign, the Sri Lankan Armed Forces militarily defeated the Tamil Tigers in May of 2009, and this brought the civil war to an end. At this time, the President and the Defense Ministry were brothers. After the defeat of the rebels, the pair were hailed as heroes. Mahinda enjoyed the adulation of voters, who approved of his bloody, yet decisive victory in a 26-year civil war against the Tamil rebels. But it wasn't a squeaky clean image for the brothers. Allegations of corruption, including questionable deals with Chinese state counterparts, swirled around Mahinda. His brother, Gotabaya, was also implicated, though to a lesser extent. He was facing scrutiny over the purchase of MiG fighters from Ukraine. But these scandals didn't stop the family from spending big. He promised huge infrastructure projects, including a Chinese-built airport, which sits largely empty. He tried to jumpstart growth by borrowing heavily and attracting foreign capital by propping up the Sri Lankan rupee. In the short term, the
There it is. They use a rupee.
strategy worked. The economy boomed, causing a per capita gross domestic product to more than double from 2006 to 2014. This vaulted Sri Lanka past Ukraine, the Philippines, and Indonesia. It lifted 1.6 million people out of poverty and gave rise to a large middle class.
Okay, so far so good.
By 2019, Sri Lanka ascended to the ranks of the World Bank's upper middle income countries. Though all of that growth came at a cost, Sri Lanka's external debt tripled from 2006 to 2012.
So wait, let me look at this chart real quick.
Yeah, this is the difference between American debt though and Sri Lankan debt, because Sri Lankan debt, they don't control the money supply. Obviously, they're in debt in U.S. dollars.
Right, most of America's debt it's to itself. So
Right. Yes. So notice how it says
Sri
Sri
Lanka
Lankan
foreign debt summary as the end of April 21. It says 47% market borrowing. I'm not sure I understand what that means.
Well, they're
Is that debt to itself? Well, it says foreign debt, so I don't know.
Yeah,
what
it's
that
foreign
means
debt of borrowing from banks. 13% is Asian Development Bank, 10% is China. I mean, the Chinese are probably just giving them the yuan, right? And you can use the yuan to exchange for dollars or whatever kind of currency you need. You can do the same with the Japanese yen. So this is how these other countries.
I think it means borrowing from private industry that's outside of, or private money markets outside of Sri Lanka. I assume that's what that means.
Right.
Okay. And then the other ones, I guess it means they are borrowing from China, Japan. Well, okay. How does this borrowing take place? Is China buying
The World
Sri
Bank.
Lankan bonds, or are they just literally taking a loan? Like, I guess that's
They take a loan.
okay. Because like we in America, when they say like China owns U.S. debt, we're not taking a loan from China. China's buying a bond, an American bond.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why I'm wondering if it's the same thing or if it's different.
Well, it is different. It's totally different, because this is more like they're going to the bank to take out a mortgage.
Right.
They're basically saying, we're going to borrow this many dollars from you at this interest rate. Where what happened, the debt that we have with China is
We
you
tell
know,
China what we're going to pay them.
well, we buy stuff from China. We have a trade deficit with China. So
Right.
we send US dollars to China all the time because China's like, China doesn't have the same situation as Sri Lanka. China is more than happy to take US dollars. So we send a bunch of US dollars. They send us a bunch of stuff, cars, natural resources, whatever, phones, whatever it is. At the end of the year, they have a bunch of dollars in the bank. Well, they can use those dollars to import stuff from other places because other places will take the dollar. But a lot of times they got everything they need. So the money's just sitting there. So America says, well, instead of your money sitting there not earning any interest, just being inflated away, how about if we sell you some bonds that earn a percent of interest or 2% of interest? The idea behind the bonds is that they're better than inflation. It's like an inflation-proof investment.
Right.
So China says, okay, I'll take the bonds. That's like, who wouldn't? I mean,
Right.
this is why when people talk about the United States debt, they're talking like we're their hat in hand. Oh, please, will you buy our bonds? No, they got a fucking big ass bank account full of billions of dollars of US dollars.
Right.
And we're just saying, hey, instead of keeping those in dollars, how about you keep them in bonds and earn a little interest? And it sops up the spending power.
Right.
Yeah. This is another thing, and this is why this is interesting to me, because Sri Lanka is an island nation. So you can kind of get a sense that they have limited resources, right? And the way inflation works is, you know, if you have a certain amount of resources and a certain amount of currency to buy all of those resources, well, if you have more currency to buy all of those resources, obviously the prices for those resources are going to go up. If you have less resources, then obviously those resources are going to be more expensive as well. And that's kind of the situation why they're having this inflation there. But they're going to go to the printing press for the Sri Lankan rupee, but they're not bringing in more resources. The problem is they need the resources. They don't like printing more money is not going to solve this problem. And this is why people are saying, Adam, MMT doesn't work. You can't just print money. It leads to mass inflation. And I'm like, I mean, MMT would predict this all day long. Okay.
Yeah.
The idea is, yes, you need more resources. You need to bring in more resources. Printing more money is not a way to fix the resource problem. I mean, it's the same with the gas situation in America. We need more gas. That's what's going to make the price of gas go down.
Mm-hmm.
Here, we'll
Well,
play
also,
a
a big
little-
problem is supposedly a lot of this debt they owe, $12 billion, is to China. And apparently, I just like a weird cultural thing, I guess. Like Western nations are far more willing to restructure debt in ways like they'll give forgiveness in exchange for trying to get something to get paid off in the future, basically.
Right.
And apparently China's just like, no, fuck you. They're like, we'll lend you more money if you want to pay us with the money. We'll lend you money to pay us back that money just now, but your principal will still be intact. So
Well, and this is ultimately the only way to get out of this is for the nation to produce something that people in the global community want that they can exchange for foreign currency that they need. So the nation has to become productive in some way, shape, or form. A lot of these nations will just obviously, start setting up sweatshops and shit like that and start selling labor to get the dollars in or whatever they want to do, whatever they have to do. Sooner or later, the economy has to be productive. And that's where a lot of people just, they can't do it. It's hard, right? I mean, what if you're the brother-in-law of the president? What are some of your ideas? Sitch, Since you're the big brain on the show,
Uh-huh.
how do we get this economy humming? How do we get?
We listen. Why are we paying with dollars when we could pay with coconuts, right? If that's our major export.
Oh, we're going to Coconut
If
Island.
that's our major export, coconuts. Why don't we just use that for currency?
What is
The gold standard is tired, Adam. We need a coconut standard.
What does Sri Lanka make or do anyway?
They
See,
they said in the beginning they said it was coconuts and something. I forgot
oh,
the
they
second
did.
part.
I missed it.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's tourism, people are coming in. I think they say a lot of it was tourism, and the pandemic fucked them up because the tourists stopped coming.
That probably had a big impact too. Yeah.
Let's watch a little more because the ESG stuff Sitch. This is why it's
Yes.
good to have. That's why it's good to have a good, very smart sidekick because
Thank you.
Sitch comes in here and is already ahead of the game on the restructuring. If you had to guess, what stipulations did the American restructuring have?
Pay us in dollars, not coconuts. I don't know.
Well,
I'm not that smart at it.
the
I have
Biden
no clue.
administration is terrible.
Oh, you
is
have to be
selling-
woke. Is that what it is? You have to be ESG? Is that what? going
Well,
on
we
here?
have this huge climate issue, right? Why don't you cut your climate
Right.
emissions?
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
They're like, listen, you owe us all this money. I got to get reelected. And we scared the shit out of all our population into thinking that the earth was going to burn up in 12 years.
Right.
We need a tiny island nation.
To cut down on its emissions.
Can you imagine? Like,
kinda silly.
Hold on. Remember that? Remember the intro? How much fucking emissions do you think they have? Look, they're right next to India. How much emission? How much smog do you think is fucking wafting off of India compared to Sri Lanka?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But the Biden administration tells the World Bank, maybe make them cut down on their climate.
Oh, it's so pathetically lame. Oh my God.
Right. Yeah. So, but this is the thing. This is why you gotta have the selectorate theory lens because that's so important here. Because it's bullshit, and it has nothing to do with ESG being this like super ability to fuck people over. It's just no, that's not it. That's not it.
Joe Biden wants to go on stage and say, I force Sri Lanka into following carbon emission standards for a greener world.
Right. But guess what? It totally caused all this. It fucked them up. Here,
From 2006 to 2012, pushing total public debt to 119% of GDP. In 2015, these policies were suspended, but the debt continued to accumulate. With each passing year, the family government made even more mistakes. Each mistake led to ever greater risk.
Oh, mismanagement.
When the
Fatal
military brother,
mismanagement.
Gotabaya, got into power in 2019, he promised tax cuts to get elected. When this came around, the government lost 25% of its revenue. To make things worse, in 2020, COVID smashed tourism. For Sri Lanka, tourist income was a huge source of funding to pay back foreign debt. Then, 2020
That's where they were getting the dollars from. Americans were bringing them in.
Mm-hmm.
21 rolls around, and Russia and Ukraine go to war. In an ill twist of fate, before the war, Russians frequently made up the biggest share of Sri Lankans' tourists, with Ukrainians not far behind.
There you go. It wasn't US dollars. It was Russians. It was the Ruskies. So there you go.
Yeah, so also that the war didn't help too because if they were getting Russian rubles and
No one wants
those-
rubles anymore.
yeah, exactly. They can't even exchange those rubles on the open market for dollars. Yeah.
Right.
You're fucked. You're fucked.
As the flights to Moscow were suspended and the Ukrainians are at war, Sri Lanka's tourism industry suffers even more. In April of 2021, the Rajapaksa government made another fatal mistake. To prevent the drain of foreign exchange reserves, all fertilizer imports were completely banned. This move was extremely radical, as no country can feasibly run their food supply on 100% organic fertilizer on a whim. Farmers overnight had to stop producing and the food supply collapsed. The country had to start importing rice and other food goods, and the price of food exploded.
So I wish they would go. What was the point? Like, what did they think was going to happen if they banned the import of fertilizer? Was there like some massive fertilizer conglomerate within the country, and they thought that that would be enough to satisfy everyone?
It's just stupidity. It's total stupidity. They can we back it up a second?
Sure.
Why did they what was the reasoning behind this?
The tourism industry suffers even more. In April of 2021, the Rajapaksa government made another fatal mistake. To prevent the drain of foreign exchange reserves.
Okay. To prevent the drain of foreign exchange reserves.
So they just don't want more money leaving the country? That's the
well,
issue?
they had reserves of dollars and rubles and all the things that they need. But they were like, in order for us to, we have to buy the fertilizer in dollars. And the problem is we don't want to give up our dollars. So they're like, fuck that. We're not going to buy the fertilizer. Right. We'll just make do with what we got.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I swear, I thought that the fertilizer thing was caught up in the ESG stuff. Maybe it is because later on when the World Bank comes in, they're like, look, you're already not using fertilizer here.
All fertilizer imports were completely banned. This move was extremely radical.
Okay, so they're like, I know how to keep the money in the country. Here, it's not only that, it's probably an agricultural nation, and they're just like, what's the top import that we have? Oh, it's fertilizer. Here, let's just get rid of that.
Oh my God.
We don't need that.
It's so fucking dumb.
I know. And then what's your export? What's our top export? Oh, it's coconuts.
You know what? This is listen. This is like when your brother-in-law is the head of
yeah, totally
economics and finance decisions, and they're like, listen, brother-in-law, we need to prevent our foreign reserves from leaving the country. What is the biggest import? What are people spending dollars on? Fertilizer. Okay, let's slash that.
Yeah, let's slash that. Exactly.
Okay.
What are people buying? What are people giving us dollars for? Coconuts that we grow with the fertilizer.
They didn't even ask that question.
It's just so, oh God.
Right.
This is why you need meritocracy. This is why autocracies fail.
Well, this is also the problem, and this is the big problem that Putin faces with corruption. And this is, when people are afraid to be challenged, and this happens obviously in normal companies and countries too. Because very often someone at the top will just say something that's really fucking dumb or doesn't make sense, and then no one will challenge them because they're afraid of getting fired.
Yeah, of course. Or even worse, beheaded or incarcerated.
Right.
No country can feasibly run their food supply on 100% organic fertilizer on a whim. Farmers overnight had to stop producing and the food supply collapsed. The country had to start importing rice and other food goods.
So now they have to import the food that they were fucking growing there.
Right. So in order to stop money from leaving the country,
yes,
they stopped them buying fertilizer, but then it backfired. So now, because they had to use that money they were trying to save to now just buy actual food. So
yes, yeah. So the self-sufficiency just went the wrong direction.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you can do MMT in an island nation if you're completely self-sufficient, and you're going to be better off in the long run because you're going to have an economy that's you can manage instead of borrowing all this foreign debt and literally owing them.
Well, you don't have to be necessarily self-sufficient to do MMT. You just need to be able to have, people have to want your currency, I guess.
Well, no, the self-sufficiency, you don't need to worry about people wanting your currency because you don't need to buy external products and need other currency to do that.
Right. But I mean, in the US, if the US needed to, okay, if there's a global war, yes, the US could become completely self-sufficient because it's large enough and there's probably enough, variety of resources around the large land mass that is the United States that they could function.
We could easily do it. Yeah.
Right. But we don't do that now.
because it's not a good deal for us.
It's not. It's not feasible currently in the situation.
Well, it is feasible. It's just not.
Well, it's not
desirable.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we get a better deal if we if China makes stuff cheap for us and we just import it.
Right.
It's a better deal for us. Yeah. If they make the rice and we eat it, that's a better deal.
I think we grow a lot of rice in the U.S., don't we?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
In California land, I think.
It's so interesting to me because, I mean, this shows like everything we've been talking about. It's funny that people were using Sri Lanka as like a gotcha. And as soon as I saw this video, I was like, this ain't no gotcha, bitch. This is I got you. This is I got you, bitch.
Rice is the third largest cereal grown in the United States after corn and wheat.
Really? Wow.
So there you go.
Had no idea.
In 2009, approximately 3.1 million acres in the United States are under rice production.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
It is a better deal for us, for these nations. I mean, they're economically subservient to us because all we have to do is fire up the printing press and give them some dollars. That's what they want. And then they can go anywhere in the world and use those dollars to buy whatever they need.
The price of food exploded. Rubber and tea, two major exports, also ground to a halt. The government reversed.
Rubber and tea, two things that you grow with what, Sitch?
Well, I'll be honest. I didn't. How do you get rubber? I didn't think it was something that was
rubber
grown.
trees.
I was like, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Rubber is grown, and so is tea. What do you need to grow things, Sitch? Give me a guess.
You need hose. You need lots and lots of hose.
Thoughts or hose?
Lots of hose. You need to have lots of thoughts about how to farm. I mean, that is true.
So you need thoughts and hose. Okay.
Yes.
Anything else?
You need the will, to plow the field. To have grit.
You need free will. You can
You
get
need
that right
seeds.
here on
you need
the
little
show.
seeds to plant, obviously.
You can get your free will right here on the show, Sri Lanka.
Right.
We take rupees here. You
Natural rubber.
You need fertilizer.
Oh, you can't just have like the cow's poop on it or something. I thought that was fertilizer.
This was eminently predictable because what happened? Why do you think the rubber and tea industries collapsed, Sitch?
Not enough cows pooping.
Yes. Maybe they don't even have enough cows. They have a food
That's
shortage.
the problem. The ESG people came. They said, listen, your cow farts are causing global warming, so you need to get rid of all these cows.
They probably were eating them. They were starving to death.
Holy shit,
in November
I'm learning
of
something. This
2021.
is incredible. I had no idea. Natural rubber is made by extracting a liquid sap called, do you know what it's called?
Rubber.
Latex.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I assumed latex was just 100% like bullshit, like man-made product. I didn't know it was from nature.
All of our rubber gloves are coming out of Sri Lanka. You didn't know that.
It says apparently they do now have synthetic rubber that is used very widely. So I don't know what the fuck we use, but anyway.
Sri Lanka. Is this a typo? Sri Lanka rose back on chemical fertilizer ban, but yields may not rebound. Maybe that's goes back on chemical fertilizer ban. Because as soon as they were like, this is a situation where you're like pulling out of the garage and you forget that your other car is parked behind you and you're like, oh shit,
right.
I just hit my other car.
No, row back. Like to say you row back on something. I mean,
okay.
That's a phrase.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, row back, like rowing in a boat.
Yeah.
So immediately they realized, like the guy probably didn't want to tell the leader, oh, remember when we banned that fertilizer?
And he totally fucked us?
Now our rubber and tea industry is totally shot.
Right.
So they're like, whoa, let's get some of that fertilizer back in. What do you say?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is the middle of winter now.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But the damage was already done.
Last year, in a highly controversial move, the Sri Lankan government banned the use and import of chemical fertilizers overnight in a bid to become the first country in the world to fully adopt organic farming. While the ban was later reversed after protests, the crop yield was
Okay, I can already predict how this played out. Okay. The Sri Lankan president or finance minister, whoever the fuck made this decision, they did this because they wanted to prevent, foreign currency from leaving Sri Lanka to go back overseas. But they can't say that.
Of course. Right? Of course they can't say that.
Right. They can't say that publicly. So what do they say publicly? They say, in order to fight climate change.
Yeah, exactly.
In order to be a green country, we will now no longer use artificial fertilizers. We will only use natural organic fertilizers.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. I understand where this is going.
I swear the ESG comes in here, though, but we'll see.
We'll see.
was already affected.
The income we get is not enough to cover our expenses. This is the only work we do. We have no other work.
And then things went from bad to worse. The country was spending more than it made, imported more than it exported. As a consequence, its foreign reserves began to run dry. This in itself isn't too unusual, as a lot of countries do this and end up borrowing more money to keep themselves afloat. But the difference here is that the foreign debt for Sri Lanka is so high that they can't even pay the interest to keep the debt expansion going. To make things even worse,
that's a big oof. That's a big oof.
The big difference is, the giant difference is, America could never be in this situation.
Right.
We would never be in this situation.
One hopes.
Well, how could we ever? Because we run the printing press.
Right. Well, and also
we're
our
not
economy
in the
is
situation where we need
strong.
dollars. Yeah.
Right.
We have the natural resources at our disposal.
Well, and also, it's also a situation where, like, if America's economy was in that dire of a situation, America's economy is so powerful and so immersed in the rest of the world, it would be fucking up everyone. You know, if you have a country like Sri Lanka, which is small, and they're kind of like tanking, it's not, they can kind of tank on their own.
Yeah.
Right.
Let
Unfortunately for
away.
them, yeah.
Oil prices were exploding internationally, so importing that cost even more than normal. And being a small island dependent on deliveries by sea made this a nightmare for Sri Lanka. The inability to import led to food shortages as foreign exchange reserves remain under strain. In February of 2022, the official inflation numbers rose to 17.5%. By June, it was 55%. The price of cooking gas, for example, is almost 3 times higher than it was just a few months ago. Even printing paper is hard to come by, forcing schools to close and cancel exams. In March of 2022...
But all this is because there's not enough resources coming into the country.
Right.
So they have the same size money supply and fewer resources. That's going to cause inflation.
Yep.
The Sri Lankan rupee posted its biggest single-day decline in more than 40 years. These next numbers highlight just how fast the situation is deteriorating. Sri Lanka's foreign currency reserves at the end of 2019 stood at 7.6 billion. This had fallen to 1.93 billion in March of 2020, and by July of 2022, all that remains is 50 million.
$50 million to run the entire country.
Well, no, I mean, that's not to run. It's just the amount of foreign dollars. They only have 50. They went from 7 billion in US dollars that they had, that now they only have 50 million in US dollars.
Yeah, but they have to import a bunch of fuel and fertilizer and all this stuff to make the country run. What happens when that's at zero? They can't import any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
None of that stuff grows on the island. They can't get gasoline.
There is no longer enough foreign currency to import basics such as fuel. On June 29, 2022, the country suspended fuel sales. It only had enough fuel for just one more day, and it will be given out in absolute emergencies.
See, I don't know how the country is run, too, because maybe it's Like the only oil company is a state-run oil company. So that 50 million is how they're, or the state foreign currency coffers are how they're buying that oil.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that's how these autocracies run, is that, you know, they make money off of industry. So they want to control all of industry.
Right.
It was the first country to ban sales of petrol since the fuel crisis in the 1970s. Before long, the situation was horrific. Citizens began starving, and there was a shortage of everything, food and fuel being the most pressing. Long fuel lines are a common sight. Arguments occur and fights break out. One rickshaw driver even dies of heat stroke. The government is now so short on funds that it's going to start printing money to pay employees' salaries, and most of us know how that turns out.
See, that's all he says, is most of us know how that turns out.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, we know, it's not the printing of money that's the problem. It's the fact that you don't have resources coming into the country.
Well, it's the printing of, the problem is that if they had the ability to print US dollars, they wouldn't have a problem.
Exactly.
They can't print the currency that they need to actually accomplish what they need to accomplish.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So paying more rupees to their employees who can't get gas at the gas station, and, you know, have more rupees competing for less apples at the grocery store. What's going to happen to the price of those apples? They're going to go up.
Yeah. If you could pay them more Sri Lankan rupees, and they could take those Sri Lankan rupees to the store and buy goods with them, that wouldn't be an issue. But
Yeah, I did. Hold on, I'll bring it up. I pulled it up because everyone always wants to only quote half of this Milton Friedman quote. And Milton Friedman is not an idiot, okay? Milton Friedman's like, what, king of the libertarians? He did the show Freedom to Choose. So here's the entire quote. You hear half this quote all the time. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. That's all you hear of the quote, right?
right.
That's it. Don't print money. MMT sucks. Fuck you, right? Here's the entire quote. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon in the sense that it is and can be produced only by a more rapid increase in the quantity of money than an output, as in like resources. A steady rate of monetary growth at a moderate level can provide a framework under which a country can have little inflation and much growth. It will not produce perfect stability. It will not produce heaven on earth, but it will make an important contribution to a stable economic society. So there you go. Milton Friedman himself was in favor of increasing the money supply as economic activity, as economic output increases, as a way of gaining price stability. Price stability is very important. You don't want to get into a deflationary spiral. But printing money in this situation, not going to help. There's no resource growth. You literally have resource contraction. You've completely eviscerated your two major imports or two major export crops.
It's basically the end of the line for the Sri Lankan economy. Sri Lanka no longer has money to import goods, and they can no longer function to produce enough revenue. In April, the government defaulted on its external debt worth 51 billion. 7 billion more is due at the end of the year.
$7 billion by December. That's hard.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, you're not going to get $7 billion worth of output from Sri Lanka.
Starting in early April of 2021, protests began to erupt all over Sri Lanka. At first, the government tried to squash the protesters, triggering deadly crashes across the country, but they couldn't hold back the tide of anger.
How do you want to be one of those Sri Lankan officers going out in the streets to beat up on your fellow citizens when you know your paycheck is not going to be able to buy gasoline either?
Right.
Yeah. If you want people to go out and crack heads, I mean, you got to pay them a lot. It's not fun.
Yeah.
The Rajapaksa brothers, once hailed by many as heroes for winning the civil war, are now reviled as leaders. It's a dramatic fall from grace for a family that dominated Sri Lankan politics for over a decade. The former president, Mahinda Rajapaksa, had to be evacuated from his official residence after protesters attempted to storm the house. Other family houses of the Rajapaksas have also been targeted elsewhere in Sri Lanka.
People are so frustrated because of Rajapaksas.
We need our money back. We need our country back. We are here to support us, these people.
I mean, everyone can see that how much we're suffering. There's lines everywhere, gas, petrol.
Currently, Sri Lanka is in a very risky situation with great uncertainty. And just to highlight this, as I was finishing up the episode, more news broke. On June 10th, hundreds of thousands of protesters broke into President Gotabaya's official residence.
Here we go! No way! We can stop it, man! That's it! That's Sri Lanka!
The moment the dam broke,
There we go!
and they swarmed into the office of a president already fled.
Bloody hell!
At 10 a.m. local time, he fled. Gotabaya's motorcade was seen speeding down the highway out of the city. His secretary and other officials didn't know his whereabouts, but he was later stopped at the airport trying to flee the country to Dubai.
Yeah, of course. That's what they do. They're like,
Oh
listen,
my god.
I'm rich, bitch.
He's like, fuck it, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Screw you people. God, that's terrible.
Yeah.
After he left,
Welcome to autocracy.
Yeah.
Protesters wearing helmets and waving Sri Lankan flags broke into the president's residence, some cooking food in the kitchen, while others are seen swimming in the pool. There was even a piano sing-along in one of the rooms to lift morale. And for the first time, several Sri Lankan military personnel joined the protesters, marking a turning point in the government's control of the situation. The protests and storming of the government residence also shows what happens when governments lose control of an economy. All other world governments should be watching this closely. Overall, it's a tragic situation, a potent combination of government mismanagement and external economic and geopolitical factors. Moreover, without a stable government, it's going to be very difficult to negotiate loans or restructure the country's debts.
So it looks like the end of the Rajapaksa family dynasty and the long years of complete control it exercised over this island nation.
What's a way out?
So how
for
can
the
this be
country?
fixed?
Oh, okay.
Well, basically, the only option is to get loans. Sri Lanka is seeking emergency loans of $3 billion to pay for essential imports such as fuel. The World Bank has agreed to lend $600 million, and the government is also asking for $4 billion from the International Monetary Fund. The IMF said that the government must raise interest rates and taxes as a condition for the loan, which would make the country's cost of living crisis even worse. They're also seeking help from China, India, Qatar, Australia, Japan, the US, and more. Sri Lanka and India have signed a $1 billion credit line for importing essentials, including food and medicine. Sri Lanka owes $6.5 billion to China, and the two are in talks on how to restructure the debt. China agreed to bolster Sri Lankan's foreign currency reserves by swapping the Sri Lankan rupee for its currency, the renminbi. Though since then, China has signalled displeasure over Sri Lanka also approaching the IMF for help. The Rajapaksas are now not only concerned for their political future, but also for their safety and security when a new government takes over. We can only hope that things turn around for the nation and they can get the resources they need to rebuild their economy. No citizen of any nation deserves what has happened to the people of Sri Lanka. So I've been sitting on this script for a couple of months, just waiting and seeing if things would improve, but they really haven't. So I think it's ultimately important that people know what's going on here. So stay safe out there if you're from Sri Lanka. Generally speaking, the news cycle can be quite negative.
Okay, so no ESG in here. I must have imagined that.
Did you see a different video or something?
Well, I think I might have read an article where they did talk about ESG in Sri Lanka. That might be it.
Okay.
They might have tied the organic farming to ESG in the article and not in the video. So, but I don't have the article handy.
Investor intel. Did ESG really topple the government of Sri Lanka?
There you go.
The recent dramatic events in Sri Lanka have led to some to allege that the country fell under the spell of ESG, also known as green terrorists, and other interesting phrases leading to the collapse of the national government and the flight from the country of its president. while there's every reason to point to the ban on chemical fertilizers as a contributing factor to the drought in the streets, ESG principles most assuredly did not collapse a national government.
Right.
There we go.
So it's fake news.
I'm assuming you saw, I don't know, someone on Twitter talking about this.
No, I read a few articles because people have been sending me the Sri Lanka thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I dug in, obviously. It was, so I read a few articles and watched a couple videos, and I thought this video had the best overall look at it that we could obviously talk about the things we know about.
Oh, here you go. Well, I mean, I think this is a good example of why ESG scores are obviously bullshit. So there's a Forbes article, and it says, it's called Rising Social Unrest Over Energy, Food Shortages Threaten Global Stability. This is from July 10th. And it says, the nation of Sri Lanka has an almost perfect ESG rating of 98.1 on a scale out of 100. However, the government which was forced the nation to achieve the virtue signaling target in the recent years collapsed over the weekend because it led the country in a self-declared bankruptcy.
Right.
So, well, first, I think the real message here shouldn't be that ESG caused the collapse, because obviously it didn't. The real message should be, what the fuck does ESG even measure? If Sri Lanka has such a high ESG rating, which is supposed to be a rating not only of like whether you're socially good or not, but also a rating of how, like how stable an investment is going to be. This proves that ESG is dog shit at figuring out both how stable the investment is and how not corrupt something is.
Right. Yeah.
So that's really the message here. It should be the collapse of Sri Lanka proves that ESG scores are utterly dog shit.
Worthless.
Because are completely worthless. Because if it had a very low ESG score, you could say, right before it collapsed, you could say, oh, okay, it was ESG, accurately predicted there was a problem here. But obviously it did not.
Well, in the video, they say they banned the fertilizer just because it cost too much money, and they were like trying to cut costs. Cost cutting.
Well, no, they didn't ban the fertilizer because it cost too much. They banned the fertilizer because they didn't want foreign currency leaving the country.
Well, that's the cost. Yeah. They didn't have the money to spend on it.
Right. But that's a little bit different than cost cutting. Like, they would have been more than happy to pay if they had a fertilizer company in their own country that they could pay with their own currency. They would have been more than happy to do that.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So
if they had, and this is the big difference, because a lot of these chemical fertilizers, they use petroleum products. So we could probably, and I don't know if there are any fertilizer factories in the US, but I mean, we could probably make one and probably drill enough gas and oil to get the raw materials to make our own fertilizer. I mean, we might just be buying fertilizer from somewhere. I think a lot of it comes out of Ukraine, actually.
Yeah, I believe that was a thing people were worried about.
Potash.
Going forward with the war, yeah.
Potash is one of the ingredients. I think it creates nitrogen, so.
Mm-hmm. Oh, maybe this is what someone sent you. This is, a lot of people swear by Michael Schellenberger. I don't really have a strong opinion on him one way or the other, because I don't follow him enough to comment on it. I know I see a lot of people retweeting him. I think Scott Adams talks about him a lot, too.
Oh, so it's got to be good.
Yeah. This is from July 9th. He had written a Substack article, and he tweeted out, and he said, a food, energy, and financial crisis has brought down Sri Lanka's government. But the underlying cause is the fact that the nation's political leaders have fallen under the spell of green elites peddling ESG and banning modern fertilizers.
I thought in the video, the ban is pretty clearly because they want to save money. They don't want to deplete their currency supplies, their foreign currency supplies.
Yes. And now that's just a source from a video. I don't know if it's true, but if I had to guess and say, why did a country ban, the importation of foreign fertilizers? If I have to make a guess here, and one of them is because they want to be environmentally friendly, and the other is because they want to protect their foreign currency reserves, I would generally assume the foreign currency reserves answers the real one, not the environmentally friendly.
Well, I would but I think there could be an ESG tie-in if they're trying to restructure their loans, and the IMF is saying, sure, we'll give you $10 billion more, but you have to cut your emissions. And they're like, okay, win-win, right? This fertilizer stuff is expensive.
Right. But that would be a different argument, because that would be once Sri Lanka's having problems, you have a foreign agencies trying to force, these things upon them. The argument that at least Michael Schellenberger is making in the Substack article appears to be, I haven't finished reading the article,
that the ESG stuff brought the problems on.
Right, is that they decided to be environmentally friendly or something, and that's what created the problem. When obviously, I highly doubt that was the motivation in the first place.
Yeah, that's not the case.
I would assume not. But
they were running low on reserves. Was the story I got.
That makes more sense to me. That makes far more sense to me than they just decided to be economic, just to be, eco-friendly green for some reason.
If there is an ESG buy-in, I would bet that it has to do with they're running low on foreign currency, so they want more foreign currency, and the IMF says, cut your emissions and we'll restructure your loan so we look good.
Mm-hmm.
And they do that. And they save spending money on fertilizer and get more money from more loans. But they're fucked ultimately because their major export crop is agricultural.
Right. Well, there you go.
Which any moderately intelligent person who does a podcast would be able to tell you.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, which is that if you're in government, you're managing some large economy, and someone says, quick, we need to stop the flow of foreign dollars out of our country. And someone says, okay, well, what's our largest import? And then they say it's fertilizer, or one of our largest imports is fertilizer. If you don't ask the follow-up question, which is, wait a minute, what's our largest export?
Exactly.
Then you fucked up. And I guess there was no asking or really accurately figuring out of how the food would be grown and how that would then be exported. So, because if that's how they're making the foreign dollars in the first place. So there you go. Interesting. Well, it's very sad. I didn't know all this crazy shit was happening in Sri Lanka right now. And I don't know how they're gonna climb out of that hole.
Well,
because what the video said is true, like they can get more loans, which hopefully could help them, but if there's no like who's in charge of the country right now?
Yeah, who's going to turn those loans into fuel that's going to go to the gas stations and is not just going to skim the money? Now, I don't know if you remember this, but from the beginning of the video, there was a 26-year civil war.
Right. Yeah,
so
exactly.
There are probably rebel thugs who want to take over and be the leadership. So they're probably going to be next in charge.
Right.
Some gang. Right?
Right. Well, there you go.
So was this interesting? I mean, I felt like it was super interesting.
I thought it was interesting, yeah.
This, obviously, the video is going to get like 500 views. But
sure. But no, I mean, it's interesting in terms of like, what's... I mean, this is why, people who really push for central planning are stupid. Why you often want to have as much, market-driven economic policies as possible. Obviously, like the government should step in to play referee, but you kind of need the market to drive itself, because it's going to be, whenever you make these changes, especially some crazy, very broad change, like we're banning fertilizer, which, I mean, first of all, I'd hope in America we'd be smart enough never to do something that crazy overnight. but it's going to have all sorts of effects that, a lone person or a lone group of people in a room somewhere may not have anticipated, which can very often cause a lot more damage.
I'm sure if you dug in too, like all the family was probably running like the oil industry and the agricultural industry. And
well, it was on that chart
in
the video.
So you don't have competitive industries competing for market share. You don't have oil companies looking for a cheaper source of oil. Yeah. Here's the chart.
Right.
So, yeah, it's structurally, it's just decentralized.
It doesn't say oil, but yeah. Well,
decentralized industry is way better.
Right. No, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. And finding leadership that's not corrupt is just, that's from scratch, basically. I mean, they're fucked.
Yep.
They're fucked.
It's unfortunate.
It's a shame that they don't. I mean, this is a time that you need colonialism. You really do. You need.
What do you mean?
Well,
you need the white man to go into Sri Lanka and fix the problems for them. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, Americans come in all colors. They don't have to be white.
Okay, that's true.
I'm sure we have enough Indian Americans that are competently trained in this kind of stuff. I guess the thing is, sooner or later, they're just going to be corrupt too. This is the problem, and they go into it in the Dictator's Handbook. The problem with foreign aid is the foreign aid rarely makes it to
where
the
you
people
want
it's
to,
intended because the family, they go, oh, we got a loan from the IMF for $10 billion. Okay, $1 billion for fuel and $3 billion for me.
Right.
It's like next thing you know, you don't have money you're running out of money. Yeah, they're spending it on themselves instead of spending it on building a thriving economy. They're spending it on bribes and shit like that to protect themselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
Institutions, everybody. Anyways.
Yeah. So that's it. Thanks a lot. Clip it. Ship it. Bye-bye. Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.